Hey Year 11s, I thought I'd make a quick video on planning for essays again, just because I felt like the topic I did this morning or Monday morning was quite difficult and yeah, it was pretty hard and it took me a while to explain myself, which may have lost your attention as well. So I thought I'd just try again. Hopefully this will be a little helpful, a little more helpful. But it's exactly the same process. So hopefully also the more times you see it and the more times you practice it, the easier it gets as well. The reason why I'm spending so much time on the planning of essay topics is that a lot of people know a lot about the text, and it was the same in the thing around your neck. You guys know it and you know how to say quotes and you know how to talk about the text, but what is missing is genuinely answering the topic. And actually, at the end of year 12, when you do your English exam, the students that score higher are students who may not have remembered, all the quotes as someone else, but they actually have genuinely tried to answer the topic. And so they, are scored high for it. So, oh, hold on, did I mute myself? No, I didn't. Okay. Hopefully it's not muted. So that's why it's really important to answer the topic. Okay, so let's start here. So the topic I've chosen is this. To what extent does a play show that prejudice can be overcome with reason or logic? So your first step is to highlight the key terms. So prejudice is a key term here. Reason and logic is a key term here. And then I'm going to highlight overcome as well, because we have to think about, okay, so can prejudice be overcome with reason and logic? Is it something else that prejudice is overcome with? Are there points where prejudice isn't overcome? So again, you have to think about how much you agree or disagree with this statement. So understand what these key terms mean, and sometimes so that's your second step, sorry, and sometimes you might need to write it down for yourself. So prejudice is an opinion based it's a judgment, a negative judgment based on a group of people without evidence. And logic and reason is based on evidence and objectively looking at a situation. Okay, this is how I have defined my key terms, and overcome means can prejudice be sort of squashed, because prejudice is a negative judgment. You guys are welcome to look up these key terms in a dictionary if you want to be really clear, but it is important to be really clear. Think about how much you agree or disagree with the statement here. So this is where it takes a while to think, and you've got to figure out, this is where your knowledge of the text comes through. So I do agree that prejudice can be overcome with reason and logic, and Juror 8 is the prime example of this. So what I'm doing now is I'm kind of conducting a preliminary brainstorm. I am trying to look at my evidence, and based on my evidence and my examples, what am I getting here? So I know that there are parts in the play, and Rose is arguing that prejudice can be overcome with reason and logic. And Juror 8 does this, and he does this really well when he's looking at the witness of the old man, and if he could get to the door on time. And if the old man could have heard the boy scream, "I'm going to kill you," when the L train was coming past, and the eyesight of the lady. And I think it was juror 9 that proved the eyesight of the lady was in question. So here are some examples that I'm going to be talking about when I say, yes, prejudice can be overcome with reason and logic. Now, I also have a thought where I disagree in that prejudice was overcome by peer pressure. As soon as the scales tipped and it was 6-all, as soon as the number of verdicts were even, the what's it called? The number of guilty and not guilty opinions were even, juror members changed sides based on the majority. And that I'm thinking of juror 12, I'm thinking of the foreman, and I'm thinking of juror 7. And then lastly, I also disagree in that sometimes prejudice is not overcome with reason and logic, because you kind of can't reason with people like juror 10, but they are overpowered by the ideals of democracy. And here I want to talk about juror 10. I kind of want to talk about juror 3. And I kind of want to talk about juror 7 when he talks to juror 11, I think. So if you remember, guys, juror 10 was incredibly racist and prejudiced, and no one was able to convince him out of that opinion. But when he started his rant, what everyone did was they recognized how much spite and hatred that juror 10 had, and they turned their backs on him, and he was overpowered, and then he just changed his mind. And then juror 3 as well, he was right at the end, and he was basically, trying to say, it's my right, I can do what I like, and no one was able to convince him either. And then he was kind of overpowered with everyone's silence, and then juror 8 said, it's not your boy, it's somebody else, and that's when he changed his mind. And so that is kind of like the ideals of democracy, kind of trying to trust in the good of someone else rather than in the evil of someone else. I'm just going to put a little underline on this because I can't quite remember. I'll have to go back to the book. But I think there is a point where, actually, no, I'm just going to get rid of it because I don't think that's true. So you can see here how I am kind of disagreeing that prejudice is overcome with reason and logic. I'm saying no, it was overcome by a couple of other things. But I think now you have to be aware of the order of your essay, because I know Reginald Rose's main message is prejudice needs to be overcome, and it is overcome based on reason and logic. And based on the facts and based on this concept of reasonable doubt. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to copy and paste it and put it right at the end. Because what I'm doing here is I am building up a story. I'm saying, okay, prejudice was actually overcome by peer pressure. It was also overcome by the ideals of democracy. But then ultimately, Rose argues that prejudice should be overcome when you look at the facts. And I'm going to do juror 4 because he says, you know, I have a reasonable doubt in my mind. I know that slums are breeding grounds for criminals, but I accept that in this case, my prejudice doesn't hold. And that is Rose's main message. And that's why it's like my third argument. It's my final punch and my strongest punch, which is why I have reordered my points. And this is something that I want you guys to pay attention. You can do an initial brainstorm, but then you might need to reorder your arguments so that they are building up a story. You're saying, yes, prejudice was overcome by peer pressure, and you could even argue it is not truly overcome, but somewhat temporarily squashed. Rarely squashed. I still didn't spell it right. And then prejudice wasn't overcome with reason and logic, but overcome, you know, it was overpowered by ideals of democracy in juror 10 and juror 3. And then ultimately, Rose argues that prejudice can be overcome with reason and logic. So there are different ways to take this essay, and this is not the, you know, fully right answer to this essay at all. But this is an idea. Now I'm going to quickly, so I did that in like 11 minutes. I'm going to quickly grab another topic and see if I can speed it up even more, and do it in maybe 3 minutes or so, just to show you how in timed conditions you're going to be having to plan essays really quickly. So it's not this one anymore. We're going to look at juror 8. The 8th juror's heroism lies in the individual courage and integrity he displays. So again, we highlight the key terms. So it's talking about juror 8. Is he a hero because of the courage and integrity he displays? And I'm going to agree. I'm going to say juror 8's courage was demonstrated in his ability to face a majority of opposing opinions and reason with them. But I also think, and this is where I disagree, but it's not really disagreeing, I also think juror 8's heroism lies in his ability to uphold the values of democracy, and that is the idea of a reasonable doubt being important. Of having a reasonable doubt to not convict a person. And then this talks about juror 8's heroism lies in the individual courage and integrity he displays. I think if I talked about courage here, maybe I'm going to talk about integrity and empathy. Actually, sorry, here is probably where we're talking about integrity a little bit more, because it's about sticking to the facts and maintaining that opinion. But I'm actually also going to say juror 8's heroism lies in the empathy he expresses for other jurors. And he's the one, if you remember, I'm going to run out of time, but he's the one who actually puts the coat on juror 3. And that's probably what